Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me on this virtual presentation. During this presentation, we will be going over how we can smooth the transition from catching to coaching, and we will discuss some restorative AI approaches. My name is Ashley Lubas, and I'm currently an EDM student within the Rutgers Graduate School of Education. I'm an English educator, and I've worked with grades K through 12. However, most of my expertise lies within the secondary education realm, although I've dabbled a little bit in higher education as well. Before we begin today, I want to go over a little bit about what we will be doing during this presentation. To begin, I want us to reflect on our educational perceptions of AI because I know that we all have them. This is an ever changing and new piece of technology that a lot of us have our own opinions on, and it's very important that we recognize those before we begin to do any work within our classrooms. Then I want us to talk about restorative practices. If you've never learned about restorative practices, also sometimes referred to as restorative justice before, no worries. We're going to go ahead and go over that before we get into the nitty gritty. We're also going to consider what restorative approaches to AI may look like. So, taking what we know about restorative practices and putting it face to face with this new technology. Lastly, I want us to learn the repair framework. This is a framework that I've created, kind of like a tool that you can use in your back pocket for your classroom use whenever you are face to face with struggles or inappropriate or misuse of AI. And that is a restorative framework for how to deal with those types of conversation and conflicts when they arise in your online classroom. All right, so to begin, taking a look at this sentence, a student is using artificial intelligence. What comes to mind? What kinds of ideas are you thinking of? What image comes to your head? Do you have any emotions, feelings, immediate thoughts or reactions? For a lot of us, it probably looks a little something like this image to the left. We think a student is doing something under our noses, doing something sneaky, perhaps even the word cheating comes to mind. Essentially, not being academically honest and not having a lot of academic integrity. However, a few of us, maybe even many of us, also think of this image. We think of artificial intelligence in a student's usage using as a tool, being able to further creativity, be able to create beautiful things, amazing things that we never could have created 10 or 20 years ago. Now, many of us may lean towards the left image, but what we'd like to look forward to is that image on the right, where we have a harmony between students and technology use. And while we might not completely be there yet, it is an important aspiration for us to have. And it's also important for us to recognize that if we lean a little bit more towards the left image, which is completely okay and completely understandable, it's time to start shifting that perspective into one that can include and integrate AI into the classroom when need be. So, going back to this idea of restorative, what exactly is restorative justice? What are restorative practices? What does any of this mean? So, restorative justice has roots in Indigenous community practices across continents, one of them being here in North America with Native Americans, but also within Indian and Asian cultures across the globe. This is grounded in collective responsibility for sustaining and repairing relationships. So essentially, when a problem comes to light, when harm is done to a community will come together to figure out how to restore and repair what has been lost or damaged or harmed. In this type of situation, it means that we're focusing towards rebuilding relationships, repairing what was harmed, and creating paths forward. What we'll be focusing away from is criminalizing student behavior, automatic punitive measures, and consequences that do not promote development. What does this mean? Criminalizing student behavior is often something that we fall into in our educational realm. It means that essentially any behaviors that are unwarranted or unwanted automatically become a criminalization. So students automatically have punitive measures, such as if you do X, Y will happen. If you use AI, you will receive a zero. Or for smaller children, if you talk back, you will sit out. These types of punitive measures do not take into account the whys behind why students do what they do or the socio-emotional health of the student themselves. And oftentimes, we also promote consequences that have nothing to do with development. Same types of situations. Having a student sit out in timeout doesn't necessarily teach them how to respectfully talk to their peers or to adults. Likewise, automatically handing out zeros or grading zeros on an assignment does not necessarily teach students how to successfully utilize technology in order to complete assignments in the future. That's why the restorative framework and restorative practices are so important in order to not only help us figure out how to navigate complicated problems or complex problems, but also how to move forward in a productive manner. That is the beauty of restorative practices. And I have this little chart to help us really try to picture exactly what I mean by this. So, in terms of level of support and level of accountability, the restorative practices falls within high support and high accountability. So this is when we work with students to address problems. But one thing that automatically comes to mind, at least for me and many other educators, maybe some of you as well, when we talk about restorative practices, is oh, we're just going to allow them to do whatever they want and we're going to be permissive. This is not the case. So, with permissive responses, you are having high support and low accountability. You're saying, "Oh, I understand why you would do what you would do, and therefore I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to help you do the assignment. I'm going to give you an extension. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z." This is permissive, and this isn't ideal in the classroom as well. What is also not ideal is all the way on the left side and lower side of support and accountability, we have neglectful. Some of us may actually feel like overwhelmed in the classroom and maybe just saying, I don't get paid enough for this, so I'm not going to deal with it at all. I am not going to do this. That would be with low support and low accountability, allowing our students to run rampant with whatever they believe fits and not having any consequences. And I think you and I both know that that is not ideal in a classroom as well. And then we get to punitive. And I'll be saying this word a lot in our conversations today, but it's important to note that punitive is not always aggressively harmful, but it focuses on the punishment rather than the restoration, rather than fixing the root cause of the problem. So, punitive measures usually do something to the student. I'm going to give you a bad grade. I'm going to fail you from this class or to remove you from this setting. And this has high accountability, which makes the students really think, but there's low support in order to get them back to where they need to be or to get them to a place in the future where they can continue to thrive. So, although today in education and historically in education, many people have fallen into punitive measures, we want to start doing this shift into restorative practices. But it's nice to look at this visual, I think, to understand the differences between all different types of methods and responses to problematic behavior or unwanted behavior in our classroom, such as AI misuse. So, now considering restorative practices and how we can implement that when we are faced with students that are misusing AI, we also have to consider what harm is done when students misuse AI. So, restorative justice practices are all about restoring harm and rebuilding community relationships. But it's important to start off recognizing what harm is being done. So, this can look like harm to students, harm to academic integrity, and harm to class community. To start off with the harm to students that AI misuse can do, it begins with a loss of skill development. So, when students are replacing the process that they do in or outside the classroom with inauthentic AI technology, they are no longer practicing the skills that they need to be successful in their professional settings or careers, which includes a loss of skill development. This also leads to a dependence on technology. Every single time that a student uses an engine such as ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, the list goes on, and every single time they receive an answer that they to them seems like perfection, seems exactly like what they need, the feeling becomes addictive. And then they can foster a dependence on technology that they didn't have before, which creates a lot of harm. And lastly, there's also a damage to academic confidence. I've seen this in a lot of students that I have worked with when they realize that an AI chatbot or a piece of technology can give a better answer, or they feel like that piece of technology can give a better answer than they ever could. It's a completely defeatist attitude to understand that, and it makes a student consider the fact that they might not be able to do this themselves, which leads to a loss of academic confidence and can really negatively impact a student's entire academic career going forward. Then we also have harm to academic integrity. So, obviously, as an institution, school, organization, you want to have academic integrity. It's going to become increasingly more challenging for institutions or administration to dissect the blurred lines of authorship and originality within student work, especially as teachers and educators are working to seamlessly integrate AI into their classrooms. It's going to become harder and harder to understand how much AI was used, where it was used, when it was used, how can we track it. And there is starting to become technology out there such as AI detectors for essays and writing and whatnot. And we can speak about the validity and the biases that may come with that on another day. However, what really matters is that you will never truly know how authentic this writing or this product truly is, which quite obviously harms academic integrity. And then this also undermines assessment validity. It's important as educators to be able to determine the level of learning and the level of understanding that our students are getting. And we cannot do that if our assessments are no longer valid because of rampant AI use in the classrooms and our assessments and our assignments with our students. Then there's also harm to class community. And as an educator, especially one in a digital space, whether that's asynchronous or synchronous, classroom community is already a little bit hard to foster and to come by. And so when you've built that up, it's really disappointing when you feel like it could get knocked down by something such as AI misuse. So when there is, it tends to have a breakdown of academic trust. It has perceived unfairness amongst peers. So many of your students might find that if one student uses AI and gets away with it and receives a high grade or high marks, then they feel like they have to do the same. And lastly, it creates distrust between teachers and students where there should be a working relationship. So, for all of these reasons explored, there needs to be something restorative what that happens when all this harm can be done through inappropriate use of technology like AI. So, what does this look like? We know what restorative practices or approaches are, and we understand how AI can harm the classroom. So, what exactly can we do about it, or should we do about it? Well, to make it simple for you, it looks like this. Educators need to be doing less public shaming of AI use. What does this mean? I would never personally recommend that any educator strips AI out of their classroom completely, especially in the year 2026 and going forward. Unfortunately, it is here to stay. And so, publicly shaming AI use doesn't exactly help or foster an environment where students understand the balance or understand the ethics of this new technology that we're all starting to get used to. Like we talked about before, we also should move towards less solely punitive consequences. So, consequences that aren't just straightforward, if you do this, I will do that. We need to move forwards understanding what is going on behind the scenes of why students are doing the behaviors that they are doing. And we also have to do less of ignoring the underlying causes of misuse. We cannot just simply chalk it up to, oh, a student was being lazy, a student didn't want to do the work, because you never know other situations or other reasons why students might be doing what they are doing. And that is the beautiful thing about the restorative approach is that you get to find out those reasons. And finding out those reasons helps you and your educational learning environment in the future. So, what do we do more of? We're doing more conversations that explore why AI is so prevalently used. Students do things for a reason. Exploring why will help us cater our environments to them. We also have to do more explicit teaching of ethical and responsible AI use. In order to have students fully understand where we as educators are coming from, they have to learn what we mean by ethical use. what we mean by limited AI. And we have to give explicit guidelines, which I'll be talking about very soon. And then again, just to summarize, we have to start repairing learning gaps and revisiting instructional materials as well. This is something that is part of the framework that we're going to get to. But essentially, it allows us as educators to do the most important part of being a teacher, which is reflecting on our own practices and our own materials, thinking, what could we change for our next group of students, for our future students that will help combat this next time? And we're getting very close into exploring the framework that I've previously mentioned. However, before beginning any type of work with restorative practices, using AI or AI misuse in your classroom, it's important that you have a strong and firm foundation. So, what does this mean? You want to clarify your own AI philosophy. Depending on your content area, you may feel very differently on AI use in your classroom setting if you are a STEM educator, if you are a math educator, if you are an English educator. However, it's important that you at least consider, from my opinion, consider implementation, at least a little bit of AI in your classroom, because we all know that although we can ban it, although we can forbid it, a lot of students are still going to go under the radar and try their best to use the technology that's available to them. So, using limited integration or full integration, whatever you decide, make sure that you define what level of AI use is allowed and when, and make these expectations explicit and visible to students. It is not enough to do one blanket statement at the beginning of the year. If you're asynchronous or synchronous, or just having it on your Canvas page, this needs to be reiterated throughout every assignment and assessment so it is unequivocally clear to students what AI misuse looks like. So, an example policy that you can use is this. And this is just one that I came up with based on my personal philosophy. But again, feel free to use whatever is best for you in your classroom setting. AI may be used to support idea development and planning, but it may not be used to create, draft, or substantially contribute to the work you submit as your own unless specific permission is given. So, once again, a student who's thinking, oh, I have no idea where to start with this project, let me use a chat engine to search up some ideas. Or, hey, I'm so overwhelmed with this project. I would like to upload the rubric. I would like to upload the assignment instructions and have a calendar layout of when I should do what. Those are all things that are clearly acceptable under this policy. But when a student starts to create the product, draft the product, or substantially contribute to the assignment or assessment, they understand that this is clear and blatant misuse. And therefore, having this policy, having a very clear and well thought out policy, will help you with the work that we are about to do within the framework when you do come face to face with conflict, when you do come face to face with the harm that inappropriate AI use in a classroom has. So, to just summarize, inappropriate use of AI must be defined for it to be identified. And this is going to help us with the repair framework. So, what is the repair framework? It is a restorative response to inappropriate AI use. It has overall 6 steps, easy to remember with the repair acronym, and it goes as such. You want to regulate before you respond, explore intentions through a restorative conference, provide education and explicit guidance, adjust the assignment or assessment, implement a new plan, rebuild trust, community, and academic integrity. So, we're going to start off with that first one. That first one is regulate before you respond. Just how we did at the beginning of this presentation, where we really sat and thought about our emotions with AI and started to consider how we can redirect that, we want to do the same thing when dealing with rampant AI misuse or inappropriate AI use in the classroom. As an educator, behavioral problems such as this or AI misuse in general can feel personal. I know what it feels like to spend a lot of time on an assignment or an assessment and really try to put your best foot forward for your students and for their learning, just for them to go and not learn at all. And instead of taking the product that you work so hard on, the assignment that you work so hard on, using AI as a roundabout way to just get through it and simply do it. It feels like a knife to the chest, but you have to give yourself grace. And before we do the rest of the framework, you have to start to separate the behavior from the student. Approach this incident with curiosity rather than accusation. Again, we want to figure out the root causes, and in order to do so, we can't be accusatory and say, you definitely did this because you just didn't want to do the work. That is not productive, and that will not help us as educators or them as students move forward productively. Step two would be to explore intentions through a restorative conference. So, this is most ideal when you meet with a student in a one to one setting. It can be a virtual format. If email is the only way, that could work as well. However, a live format I tend to find is the best. But just make sure that you're getting to the one on one to have this conversation. And what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to ask open ended, neutral questions. Some of these can include, can you walk me through your process? What were you hoping the AI would help with? What about the assignment was unclear to you? Once again, see how these questions aren't accusatory, but simply trying to gather information and foster a deeper understanding of the situation that happened from when you assigned the assessment or the assignment to when they submitted it. And throughout all of this, you're going to want to identify root causes. Some of these root causes can be avoidance. Maybe the student simply didn't want to do it, but many cases that is not what the actual student's intention is. It can also be desperation, meaning they had so much work, or maybe the assessment was too much in too little time and they felt desperate. It could be misunderstanding, not knowing what the line was. Maybe the policy wasn't clear enough, or maybe they thought, oh, a quick usage of this AI platform wasn't really cheating. It can seem like misunderstanding. And then it can also be a lack of confidence in abilities. Maybe they say to you, hey, when we did this simulation in class, it made a lot of sense. But for some reason on the assessment, I didn't understand it at all. And it didn't seem to correlate. And I panicked and I used AI. That type of information is so valuable. And you're going to want to gather as much of it as you can. Then you're going to want to provide education and explicit guidance. So, once again, I sound like a broken record, but it's very important to be clear. You need to clarify ethical and responsible AI use with the student. You need to define the boundary between support and substitution. And when you have done both of those things, you can also reteach assignment expectations. Walk them through. If there is AI usage allowed in a limited capacity, walk them through exactly that might look like. You can give them ideas for how they can use AI responsibly, and also make sure to list out the ways that they have not used it responsibly in the past. And one very important thing, and probably one of the best parts about restorative practice, is that you have to be able to understand that maybe the student just doesn't know any better. We cannot assume that students already have the proper education. And this comes from a culturally responsive pedagogy as well. To understand that not every student may have the same technological background, the same upbringing, the same educational experiences using AI or not using AI, or having any guidance on digital literacy at all. So we can't assume that every student is the same and every student is simply going to know what we mean. And this part of the repair framework really helps build that community and allows us to stop and be preventative about future AI misuse. Then comes the fun part. You have to reflect, once again, as we said before, on yourself. This is really important. You're going to want to take a look at that assignment or assessment that you gave and maybe make some potential adjustments. You're going to want to revise it to strengthen authentic learning in the future. And I have a few tips for how you can do that on the right hand side under potential adjustments. But I also just want to say that you can do this by adding structures that require visible thinking or processes. So, in all, maybe your assignment, although you've wanted to focus on the process of learning and how they were getting there, graded on the product. And if you wanted to focus on the product, maybe you put too much weight in the process. And so we have to really revisit and review our learning objective as well to see what was the point of this assessment? What can students use AI for in order to create the product, and what can they not use AI for to show me and to demonstrate their true understanding and their true learning. And then through this, you can start to consider whether AI should be limited or intentionally integrated. Once again, reiterating this fact that the more that you can intentionally integrate it, the less problems you'll have with misuse, just because students understand exactly how, when, and where they can use this technology that is so very tempting for them to be using in the first place. Going towards potential adjustments, you take a look at your assessment, you take a look at your assignment, and you're realizing, okay, maybe it wasn't exactly what I wanted. And I also want to start making it more what we want, or what we want to call AI proof. Can anything really be AI proof? No, but the following adjustments can definitely help. When you require process work, so this can look like outlines, drafts, or checkpoints throughout the course of an assessment or a project or assignment, you're allowing students time and benchmarks to do the work themselves. And when they have that, they usually tend to do so. Thinking back to those reasons why students use AI, misunderstanding, desperation, a lack of ability, this helps fight that. You can also include in class writing or discussion of components. This is only if you have a synchronous class that allows for it. While students are in breakout rooms, while students are discussing with you in conversation, you can start to jot down live what the conversation looks like and make that the focal point of the assignment. That way, we're taking something tangible that they can reflect back on in class to create a future product for you. You can also ask students to explain their thinking or decisions through reflections. And this one is great, especially when you are allowing students to have limited AI use, because it's allowing them to still use the critical thinking part of the learning process to examine what maybe the AI did or did not do, the choices that they made, the prompts that they used. Prompt engineering can be great for creative thinking processes as long as students are asked to explain those decisions or that thinking. And then lastly, I've seen this a few different places. You can redesign prompts to require personal connections. So, for example, if you have something from a student's specific background or a personal memory to go off of for a writing piece or a different type of project, that requires a lot of personal information. And if a student were to use AI to help them facilitate that, it might be a lot more work than it's worth in order to give and prompt this type of information that is needed to create a product all about themselves personally. At that point, they might as well just do it themselves. And at a lot of points, they do. So, creating it a little bit more personal assignments, making them more meaningful, can go a long way as well. All right. And one of the last steps is implementing a new plan. And this is where it gets to okay, we've had a restorative conversation. We've discussed the true intentions behind why the student did what they did and what really happened. Based on the information you have gathered, you will determine a plan that restores learning and reinforces expectations. You want to choose a response aligned with the situation and the assignment. So each situation is definitely going to be unique based on whatever conversation you had. And this is also your time to understand hey, if this was a really severe harm done, if it was a final exam, etc., and also if you have policies in place in your institution that you have to follow through with, go ahead and follow through with them. The restorative part wasn't necessarily the consequence or what happens after, but it was also the process getting here and not just simply going straight to the reporting a violation or giving a zero. It's the process of rebuilding that relationship for next time. So each situation is going to be unique. And while sometimes you are going to have a punitive consequence, you want to prioritize restorative solutions before defaulting to punishments like that, if they're possible, and if you feel within your discernment that they're aligned with the situation at hand. Restorative responses are not one size fits all, and the goal is to repair the learning and rebuild integrity. So, whatever that looks like for you, go ahead and do it. If you follow steps 1 through 4, you've collected enough information and done the work in order to determine what to do next. And through all of this, you have rebuilt trust, community, and academic integrity. Going through the repair framework, it takes time and it takes practice and intentional effort, and it's not always fun. But these restorative conversations, when done thoughtfully, strengthen relationships, and they also keep learning instead of surveillance at the center of our educational environments. No teacher wants to sit there surveilling and constantly being worried about when or where students might be trying to undermine their academic integrity next. Instead of doing so, we want to take time to build our relationships and create an environment where that doesn't have to happen in the first place. AI is not going away, and therefore our responses as educators matter. What we do in the face of this new technology matters. And the repair framework is just one small part of what we as educators can do when faced with that challenge. That is all I have for this presentation today. I'd like to thank you once again for joining me. Once again, my name is Ashley Lubas. If you would like to connect with me, as I said, I am a future English educator. I am currently in my master's program, and I would love to furthermore discuss AI, future technologies, and classroom implications and integrations of this technology with you. So feel free to connect with me. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.